Hey everybody, my name is Leigh Griffin and I am delighted to be with you today at ELEC to talk about a really interesting research paper that came from a master's thesis that I completed through SETU around lean enterprise excellence. So the work we done was an analysis of agile coaching competency among practitioners. And this was a collaboration with a colleague of mine called RJ, who is based out of Raleigh in the US. So it's a little bit about me in terms of the context, I suppose the motivation for carrying out this research. I am ICF ACC accredited after undertaking an 18-month ACTP course. For those of you unaware of what that is, ICF are the gold standard, as they call themselves, of international coaching. And it is a very high bar in terms of competency and expectations to achieve that accreditation. I'm also Scrum Aligned CTC accredited as of yesterday, which again is one of the capstone certificates in terms of career coaching as a target and a destination. As I mentioned in my intro, I wrote a thesis around agile coaching competencies for my Masters in Lean Enterprise Excellence, which was through SETU here in County Waterford. And my current role is that of a software engineering manager in a company called Red Hat. So Red Hat are a multinational and we build software solutions and provide them to our customers globally. And as part of my role, I help with process improvement and help guide the careers of almost 60 individuals spread geographically around the globe. So just to set the scene for, I suppose, the research that we've done, what is coaching? Because people have heard of coaching. They think of sports coaching, they think of health coaching, fitness coaching, life coaching. They're all flavors of the same core principle. And simply put, coaching is a series of focused and deliberate conversations between you and me. And in those conversations, we'll try and uncover what's really important to you and work out areas that need some focus to align with values that you might have. Looking into that definition, coaching is all about the client. The client or the customer, depending on your viewpoint, comes to a coach with a challenge, with an idea, with a problem. And that problem could be as trivial as wanting to buy a new kettle. Or it could be a life-changing decision like changing career, going back to college later in life, or having another baby in the family. And effectively the role of the coach is to facilitate both the client's identification of the problem, because often the problem gets wrapped up and the manifestation of that problem might not be the issue that they actually wanted to talk to you about. And that's typical when there's a feeling of guilt or various emotions that might be holding the person back. And I love this graphic for it because it captures it so elegantly that the client's view of the world is so jumbled that my role as a coach is to try and untangle that and present back a picture to them. Ultimately, for the client to come up with solutions to solve those problems, not for me to provide those solutions. Now, framing that around the software industry is still in its infancy. It's really around since the 70s, but the reality is it's the early 2000s. People might have heard of the dot-com burst and boom, but in the early 2000s, software really started to develop as a mature industry. A number of reasons for that. Mobile phones, laptops, ubiquitous internet connectivity. That helped create a mass of consumer consumption profile changes. You think back to the 90s, maybe the early 2000s, for a lot of people, your only interaction with technology might have been through a bank or through something very formal in a workplace environment. Now every day we're interfacing with technology. I'm recording this, I'm using my mobile phone, we're on the internet, remote work is a thing. So with the software industry's relative new journey that they're on, best practices still have not stabilized. If we compare that to lean, where there's almost a century's worth of best practices going back to the Ford manufacturing and arguably back to the Arsenal in Venice, where the initial ships were built in a lean oriented manner. That's centuries of best practices, and software can't call upon that. So 20 years ago, all of the leading thinkers in the world of Agile, which was the coined phrase, which is a derivative of lean, and talks towards continuous improvement. They came together and they brought forth this manifesto. And they tried to change the style of how we built software, because previously it was known as a waterfall. And if you can visualize a waterfall, it's that steps of stairs where you fall off a cliff, you move down to the next level, and so on. And that's how we done it. We talk with a customer, we'd get requirements, we'd ignore the customer for the next year to 18 months, we'd develop it, we'd test it, we'd ship it, and that'd be the first time the customer sees it. Now we're talking about involving the customer. Now we're talking about getting workable deliverables so they can see and give feedback loops as they go through the building of the product. We want customer collaboration. We don't want the customer to be someone that pays and we ignore them and then we deliver value hopefully at the end of it. We want them involved. We want them as part of the process so that we can make incremental changes as we move forward. And this is where the responding to change comes in. Customers often don't know what they want, in the same sense the client coaching picture earlier. What they're coming with as an idea might not be exactly what they want. And the Agile Manifesto was published, and people still follow it to this day, which is wonderful. So it's after becoming a real bedrock for how software is built, both at a mechanical level and more importantly at a mindset level. And this has driven almost an umbrella view of process improvement or continuous improvement paradigms in here. Without going into too much detail, because they're very developer specific, the upper part of the umbrella are very specific development oriented tasks. But if you look towards the bottom of that, you'll see things like Scrum, Lean, Kanban, AUP, XP. They're more heavyweight processes or frameworks. I won't get into why Lean is in there. It should be almost separate to this. But there is a paradigm around Lean startup that has come into software. And similarly, Kanban, from a flow perspective, got abstracted from Lean and became its own process-based methodology. But the beauty behind this is clients or teams pick what suits them. They work on what they feel is needed that will help them improve in the here and now. So looking at that holistically, what benefit does coaching bring? So in my review of the literature, there are a couple of really key papers and key points that stood out. So I'm just going to briefly touch on these. It's now considered a key approach by improvement specialists, and it's effectively a power tool for transitions or transformations. So effectively, if you're bringing someone in to try and change how a company works, you want to focus on coaching the mindset rather than coaching or delivering, shall we say, tools, techniques, and a more mechanical way of working. It is a cornerstone of transformational leadership. Any C-level executive globally in the Fortune 100 companies have dedicated coaches. They're there for mindset work. They're there for a level of psychological safety to allow leadership to effectively transform their way of thinking. And that has seeped down through an organization. So it's no longer exclusively at a C-level. It's the whole way through the management chain and all the way down to anyone that's a transformational leader, irrespective of their title or their day job. It's an engagement accelerator. So engagement is so important right now within the software industry because burnout is a thing. One of the downsides of the move to remote work has been long days because people are unable to identify when work should stop because they're at home, they're comfortable. And burnout is really a symptom not of overload of work, it's a symptom of a lack of engagement. And coaching becomes an engagement accelerator because it gets people to tap into what they're strong at, what they're passionate about, and in turn use that as an opportunity generator within a team or a company. But more importantly, to go back to that mindset versus mechanical view of the world, it is a cultural and mindset builder. And any successful and sustained change need to tackle both culture and mindset. The statistics for lean-oriented transformations, which Bateman mentions, is under 10%. And lean has such a rich history of over 100 years, and their metric for this is sustained change. Not coming in and getting an initial spurt of activity and a feeling of a transformation, but an actual transformation that will last long into the life cycle of a product or a company. Software does not have enough metrics to even quantify what success looks like. But from a practitioner perspective, that 10% mark feels about right. So agile coaching is a form of blended coaching. So I mentioned earlier about life coaching or fitness coaching or football coaching or any of the other variants that are out there. In terms of coaching, we call them a blend. And the reason it's called a blended coach is you're taking all of the domain knowledge, the expertise you have, packaging them with your coaching skills, and effectively delivering that blend to a client. This is the industry accepted view from Lisa Adkins, who had a seminal book on agile coaching, which is effectively viewed as the Bible for anyone within a coaching capacity that's interested in agile. And this is a competency framework that was derived from a practitioner perspective rather than an academic perspective, but it captures the various blends that a coach has to lean into. Looking at it from the right hand side and going clockwise, we have your traditional coaching skills and facilitating, because a large part of agile is ceremonies and events that needs a facilitator to guide the team through to get to the end goal, be that value delivery or discovery. At the bottom of the view, and this is colloquially known as the X-Wing because of the shape of it, so at the bottom of the X-Wing, you have various masteries, from being a transformational specialist, which brings in connotations around culture and mindset, to business mastery, which is really domain specific. So my business mastery, for example, would be in the software domain, but that would not translate to trying to do an agile transformation in academia or in finance or in healthcare, because they're different business domains which have their own nuances. Technical mastery hints towards the fact that agile is very oriented towards software, and it talks towards your technical capability at a software engineering level. On the left hand side of the X-Wing, you have mentoring and teaching. And this is interesting because coaching often gets confused with mentoring, where mentoring is I'm using all of my world experience to share my knowledge and tell someone how I've solved problems that they might have had similar problems coming up. Teaching is your classic teaching. It's educating people, it's equipping people with skills, knowledge, and attitude to succeed and get to career best. And an agile coach has to do that to instill both the mechanics and the understanding and the rationale behind why they're following a certain approach or using a certain tool. And at the top of the X-Wing is the core knowledge to be an agile coach. That's agile lean practitioner, and it effectively means having the background and knowledge and the toolkit to succeed in the role. Now, the current challenge, it's manifold. The role is a panacea for any organizational strife. So anything that happens in an organization, a coach is thrown at it, rather than targeting what the coach's output and ability and capabilities would be. And it is predominantly a practitioner-driven role. In my huge amount of reading and background, there's very light academic contributions in the sphere of process improvement coaching. Coaching itself as a discipline is still in its infancy, quite like software, but that intersection point of process improvement coaches is such a rich area that's waiting for future researchers, and it's an area I absolutely want to keep exploring. And as mentioned with Lisa Adkins, an absolute domain expert, a wonderful coach, a wonderful trainer, but it was a practitioner-derived framework. It's lacking that rigor, and that is reflected in the breadth of skills. So to quickly jump back, there are several key skills to achieve coaching, facilitating, teaching, and mentoring, let alone the masteries underneath that. And that drives a complex depth. There's the almost infamous, because there's a lot of research and conversations debunking it, but the standard is 10,000 hours of intensive and deliberate practice to master something, and ICF used that for their master coach accreditation as a benchmark. So going back to our X-Wing one more time, if you need 10,000 hours to master coaching, facilitating, teaching, mentoring, and maybe one of the masteries, because you don't need all of the masteries, that's a lot of time. That's a lot of dedication and a lot of effort. And the current challenge that I'm observing at a practical level, as being both a practitioner, being a manager, working with these teams day in, day out, the lack of sustained transformations is possibly under the 10% mark. But coaches, from my observation and the industry observation, they're acting more in a consultancy or a mentoring manner. And this is a real prescriptive way of following what works for them, rather than being client driven and following what the client needs to solve in the here and now. And that effectively forces conventions on the team that when the coaches withdraw, the mindset is not there to carry on the work. Now, the gateway to coaching can be very low. This can be a 2-day course, and that's all it takes. You get a piece of paper. So there's a certification mill approach going on around it. Whereas you take the ICF accreditation, which I mentioned in my intro, that was 18 months for me. The Scrum Aligned CTC certification was almost 4 years. So there's a differential between the capability and the competencies to go to the research topic in and of itself, of someone that takes a 2-day course and someone that's committed multiple years of their life towards the pursuit of that goal, yet they'll have the same title. And this, to me, makes it difficult for even myself, as someone with a lot of years experience in this, to know where to invest and master. Because that X-wing is so broad, it's okay to not be strong in every one of the quadrants, but what quadrants should you go and focus on and invest your time into? And this brings me to why competencies are important, because competency or competence from the dictionary definition is a set of demonstrable characteristics and skills that enable and improve the efficiency or performance of a job. In other words, it lets people know what to expect of me, and they in turn know what my quality is. I also know what skills I need to bring and deliver, and by having competencies, it grades where I am. So as much as I love football, I couldn't be playing in Qatar in the World Cup. My level is on a different part of the competency scale versus a professional footballer. Coaching is identical to that. So understanding what your competence is, where your strengths, your weaknesses are, that was one of the motivators behind this study. And this was the objective. Let's distill down those competencies of people who are self-identifying as Agile coaches. So we done a snowball survey. We targeted various Agile groups to seed the survey and propagate it through their networks. And we were only interested in people that self-identified as a coach. And we got 143 respondents in total, which is a fantastic number to give a level of confidence towards the insights that I'm going to walk us through right now. We targeted popular accreditations, and Scrum Master is the most popular. That's your 2-day course, but the Scrum Master, as per the Scrum Guide, has a lot of coaching connotations for how to transform a team. We also looked at the CTC and the equivalent, which is a tier above it again, CEC, which is the Enterprise Coach for Scrum Alliance, and ICF accreditation. So there we're getting entry level the whole way up to super advanced. And we used a Likert scale on the capabilities based on the X-Wing and their own commitment to the role. And the initial findings were really interesting because we really wanted to focus on their coaching skill and where they are in their journey, because it's a well understood paradigm and metaphor that coaching is a journey, and it's not so much a destination, it's the learning as you go on the journey, which ties back to the whole mindset and concept of continuous improvement. So what we found with this, 22% identify as an Agile coach but have no qualifications and no plans. So they're in an area where they're operating in a coaching capacity, maybe not with the formal title, but they have no qualifications. How is their competency being assessed? And where they are on their journey at a 7.9 on our 1 to 10 scale that we had, with 10 being you're there, you're at the final destination, is not too far away from people that have even some qualifications. So the Scrum Master qualification only was at a 6 under coaching. Yet people with no qualifications have a 7.9, which is interesting. The ACC and ICF qualifications undoubtedly were the highest in terms of the coaching capabilities, but there's a little bit of humbleness in that group, and that their journey is still somewhere to go. They're at an 8 out of 10, which is interesting. But what was really demoralizing and interesting at the same time is that 62% of our respondents have no intention of attaining any additional accreditations in the coming 12 months. And that to me is very much an anti-pattern with the mindset that a coach has, and particularly a mindset of a coach in continuous improvement. And we ran this survey towards October last year, which was still in the height of the pandemic, with remote work bringing new challenges, new opportunities, and new ways of working, yet the coaches were still not interested in pursuing more qualifications. And that to me is the hallmark of the journey for coaches. And there's an overinflation, which to me correlates to personal experience of views of people with no qualifications or no minimal plans. And those very high ratings are are worrying, because now we have coaches that are maybe overinflating their sense of capabilities and leading teams rather than coaching teams. So that's going back to that concept of being a consultant or being a mentor. So we done some correlation and model analysis on this. And without boring people with the stats and the details, the R squared number is the interesting one here. So 66.8% of the coaching capability can be explained by the model. So what we done as a predictor, we passed in where they were on their journey, the masteries for tech business. We left out deliberately the transformation mastery, the technical mastery from one of the other models, because we felt it was something that would pollute the outcome, because not all coaches that work in software have a software background. I'm one of those exceptions, having come from a degree in software engineering and as a software analyst for several years, but it wasn't reflective in the initial set of data, which we just didn't show here for brevity. But all of the predictors from the X-Wing came in with the dependent variable of coaching, and we can explain 66.8% of the model, but where's the other almost 33% of the model? So that's a worry that the current competency model is not wholly capturing the coaching needs and the coaching expectations and the coaching capabilities of our agile coaches. We looked at some correlations, and there was reasonable correlations between coaching and transformation mastery at a 0.46 and coaching and business mastery at a 0.42. And what we're taking from this is the perceived success of transformation is correlating with their coaching capability and the business mastery, because the key part of coaching is interfacing with the business. It's interfacing with customers, with partners, with the business units. And we're feeling from this as an interpretation, and this is going to be part of our future work, that coaches are misinterpreting the success based on their knowledge and attributing it to their coaching capability rather than their masteries of both transformation and business. We ran a pairwise analysis to see what groupings were coming out. So if you look at the screen here, if you can follow my mouse, you have 4 that are grouped with A, 3 grouped with B, 4 C's, 4 D's, and 3 E's. And what that's saying is those 4 and 3 numbers are grouped together, which means that they have a correlation and a natural relationship between them. What's unsurprising here is facilitating, mentoring, and teaching are grouped as one. Mentoring, teaching, and coaching are grouped as a trio. The masteries are grouped together. And what that's telling me is that there's a mix-up. So does a coach and does a team, more importantly, understand when they're being coached, when they're being mentored, when they're being taught, when they're being facilitated? And if we can't delineate from those, that's a problem with what Agile coaching is trying to project from a blend perspective. And to go to the ICF competencies and the ICF code of ethics, a clear part of the definition of being an ICF accredited coach is to help clients understand the difference between mentoring, consultancy, coaching, training, therapy, and other disciplines, and to stay within the pure coaching capacity. But what the stats here are telling us is that there's a natural grouping, which means there's common mix-ups in the expectations of the coach, which in turn affects the expectations of the teams. They go back to the competency definition I shared earlier. This is just another slight look in at the coefficients here, where mentoring, teaching, facilitating, and coaching are the real focus point here. And what the model is showing us here is that for every increase in one of facilitation skills, we increase our coaching capability by 0.198. For every one increase in mentoring, we increase by 0.379, and for every one increase in teaching, we increase by 0.183. And what that's telling us in a non-statistical manner, the better and stronger we get at teaching, mentoring, and facilitation, the stronger our perceived coaching becomes. So there's definitely a statistical intersection point there where there is that mix-up, and the perceived additional skills and benefits in those different disciplines are now impacting our view of how strong we are as a coach. So to talk towards the conclusion here, the role is overloaded in terms of expectations. I think that's very clear from the visual of the X-Wing, the 10,000 hours analysis to reach a level of mastery. And we're seeing that from the statistics that have been derived. There's a mixing up of skills and competencies that we have a reasonable number of respondents to draw these initial conclusions. This is worrying because that facilitation, teaching, mentoring, and consulting intersection becomes very hard to disentangle from a coaching perspective, which in turn is going to confuse the teams and the clients that they're working with. And what is most worrying from this is the high percentage of people not interested in taking on new skills. So as a transformation coach, you're meant to project and lead into the teams from a sense of capability, from a sense of pursuit of knowledge and continuous improvement, but it doesn't seem to be happening. The caveat here is, while the number is 143, it's reasonable to give insights, but a more targeted survey would need to be undertaken to maybe look at the higher levels, such as the ICF accreditations, the CTC accreditations, to see, is it prevalent at career coaches, or is this potentially something for the fleeting coach that has a passing interest or took your 2-day course and transitioned into being a coach? The current model could benefit from more in-depth research. So the current model, as mentioned, was being derived by practitioners, and something that I've worked towards as part of my master's, and I'm just going to present it as a final image here, is creating a more research-driven model. And this is what that model looks like. So not quite the visual of an X-Wing, just to look at it from a high-level competency. So the blue boxes at the top are the competencies, which talk towards being an influencer within the team. And under each blue box are what we call behaviors. So an influencer is someone that builds relationships, they help inspire the team, they persuade others from stakeholders and customers about the journey that's ahead, they demonstrate commitment, and they engage in dialogue. And from my research, we've repeated that for continuous learner to tie into the fact that as a coach, you need to project that mindset. Agile lean practitioner to me is immovable. It's an agile coach. You need to have those core knowledge. To be an advocate for the team, to be an advocate for coaching, to be an advocate for the paradigm of process improvement, and effectively be a champion or like a walking ambassador for it. And finally, to specifically focus on the coach. And this to me was the key section of the model, because it's really delving in to key characteristics and behaviors and not just having a grab all of coaching. It's talking about ethical behavior, which is helping to differentiate from teaching, facilitating, mentoring. Talking about embodying the coaching mindset, actively listening, generating a safe space from a psychological safety perspective, and maintaining presence. So it's talking towards some of the key ICF competencies, but also engaging at a team-wide level for the likes of safe space generation and active listening. That is my presentation. Thank you so much for attending, and for those watching the recording. It really was appreciated. And my email is there. It's lgriffin@redhat.com. You can catch me at Leigh Griffin on Twitter, and I'm on LinkedIn as well. I'd love to get your feedback. I'd love to connect and chat more about Agile coaching. And once again, thank you for attending, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference.